Elvis Presley's secrets were held for decades by the Memphis Mafia. One member of this tight circle was David Stanley. He wasn't merely the stepbrother of Elvis. He served as his protector, helper, and facilitator. Stanley, who was 73 years old, says Elvis intentionally took the pills that killed him. He claims that Elvis liked girls as young as 15. The rest of the world turned away. Fans wouldn't watch it. Even more startling is what else he disclosed. Elvis Presley was born in a small two-room home in Tupelo, Mississippi, early on January 8, 1935. But he wasn't by himself. His twin brother, Jesse, was born 35 minutes earlier. Jesse, however, did not make it. His birth was stillborn. The Presleys were forever plagued by that moment. Gladys, Elvis's mother, was never able to move on. Elvis was treated like he was living for two as she poured all of her love, fears, and hopes into him. They only had an unmarked burial for Jesse because they couldn't afford a headstone. Often, when Jesse was alone himself, Elvis would converse with him. He felt that he had the vigor of two persons because of Jesse. Elvis was really poor as a kid. In their modest home, the family possessed power, but they were unable to pay for its use. From a neighboring well, they transported water. Meals were prepared with inexpensive cornmeal. Vernon, Elvis's father, was caught for forging a $4 check when Elvis was 3 years old and was imprisoned for 8 months. Gladys was forced to move in with family after selling their home. By Elvis's 13th birthday, they had lived in at least 6 different houses. When he brought gravy-covered biscuits for lunch, he was made fun of for wearing clothes he made himself. They survived with the assistance of their neighbors and government handouts. Amidst the difficult existence, there was music. At church, Elvis discovered it. When he was 9 years old, he experienced a strong emotion during the first gathering of God in East Tupelo. The church embraced loud, happy, and passionate music with wide arms. When he saw Elvis watching, a pastor called Frank Smith gave him some guitar lessons. Elvis had a book on how to previously. He had it, but he couldn't afford much else. Gospel singing was his passion. He felt at peace. He continued to sing gospel throughout his life, even backstage at performances. In the 1930s, Mississippi was beginning to disintegrate. Bugs destroyed the cotton fields. Entire communities had been drowned in the 1927 flood. All were decimated by the Great Depression. However, that mess produced something unique. Black and white impoverished families ended up living near to one another despite segregation. The neighborhood where Elvis's family had resided was predominantly black. He enjoyed listening to blues and black gospel music whenever he could. In the evening, he tuned into WDIA radio, where B.B. King sang the unadulterated material, which Elvis would then incorporate into his own style. That music was off limits to the majority of white children. Elvis was not stopped. The Presleys packed up their belongings and relocated to Memphis in 1948. There were employment, Vernon had been told. It felt like a whole new world to Elvis. 1,600 pupils were enrolled in his new school. It was too much to handle. When his first day was over, he ran home. They were accepted into the public housing project Lauderdale Courts a year later, though, and it was the turning point. The location was near Beale Street. The blues home. Elvis began attending gospel performances at Ellis Auditorium. Every day, he was surrounded by music from the church, the streets, and the radio. Gladys had bought Elvis his first guitar back in Tupelo on his 11th birthday. She had turned him down for a rifle and possibly a bike. For $7.90, she got him a guitar. Everything was altered. He learned how to play on his own. He was not a music reader. He simply listened, picking things up by ear. His style was energetic, loud, and physical. Strings were often breaking. He combined country, blues, and gospel into a crazy sound. Elvis had a distinctive appearance from other students at Humes High School. Dressed in dress pants, he had his hair done like a movie star. People believed him to be odd. He was shy and silent. Then, in April 1953, there was the talent show. No one was expecting much, but the audience erupted when he took the stage and began to sing. He gave 2 performances. He had to give an encore. The quiet child suddenly rose to prominence in school. Elvis held various occupations after graduating. At the theater, he served as an usher. A fight with another man led to his termination. A little drama because a girl gave him free chocolates. In addition to building furniture and working in a tool shop, he even assisted a rabbi in turning on lights on Shabbat. His most significant position was in 1954. For Crown Electric, he operated a delivery vehicle. His favorite stations were scratched into the dashboard because he was unable to read the radio dial. Regardless of his profession, he continued to practice his music. At night, he walked Beale Street and listened to the blues. BB met him. King. He went to clubs to watch musicians. White children were rarely found in those settings. But Elvis was unconcerned. Later on, he stated that they had been singing in that manner for years. I merely exaggerated it. He intended it. His own enthusiasm was added to what he heard in those juke joints. Elvis paid Sun Records to record 2 songs in 1953 as a small birthday present for his mother. There was no action. After several months, he returned and recorded 2 additional tracks. Although he signed his name down, studio owner Sam Phillips remained silent. Something odd happened in a modest Memphis studio on July 5, 1954. When Elvis Presley was only 19, he began to tinker with an old blues tune. It is okay, Mother. It was not pre-arranged. It was not polished. But everything came together when bassist Bill Black and guitarist Scotty Moore stepped in. It was a crazy noise. No, it wasn't rural. It wasn't blues. It was neither, but it was both. After hearing it, Sam Phillips, the man in charge of Sun Studio, instructed them to try again. He struck a record this time. They created what would soon be known as rockabilly that evening. It also brought about a complete transformation. The song was played on radio just 2 weeks later, on July 19. One time it was played by Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips. However, then, once again, that night, he reportedly played it 14 times. The telephones kept ringing. This voice made people curious about who it belonged to. Did he have black skin? Or white? Dewey inquired about Elvis's high school. It's Humes High, Elvis said. His one response revealed his race to the audience. His rhythm and vocals, however, were directly inspired by black music. And everyone was blown away by it. Other shows came next. A bit more noise. What people were hearing and seeing was unbelievable. Then came the next significant step. A percussionist from Louisiana Hayride named DJ Fontana was brought in. He made Elvis Presley's band complete. Playing hard, sometimes 3 gigs a day, they became known as the Blue Moon Boys. While critics sneered, fans screamed. They went ahead against the opposition of other towns. Bill slammed his bass, DJ punched his drums, Scotty's guitar danced, and Elvis. No one moved the way he did. Colonel Parker, a man, was observing from behind the scenes. He was a quick salesman, but he wasn't really a colonel. In August of 1955, he was in charge of Elvis. Not quite, but it's close. It was completed in March 1956. Parker didn't waste time and had complete control. He negotiated. Originally stole 25% of Elvis's money, then 50%. He also sold I Love Elvis and I Hate Elvis buttons to earn money from those who detested the singer. Parker gained $22 million from his merchandise. Idea in just 1 year. Elvis was wanted by RCA Victor in the same year. He requested $35,000 from his contract owner, Sam Phillips. That had never happened. RCA agreed. They paid $5,000 in retroactive royalties on top of $35,000. November 21, 1955, was the date of the agreement. Now, Elvis was an RCA performer. He was just 20 years old, but a lot more was to come. 2 months later, on January 10, 1956, Elvis entered Nashville's RCA Studio B. His 21st birthday was only 2 days away. He wrote the song Heartbreak Hotel, which was inspired by an actual suicide note that said, "I walk a lonely street." It had gloomy lyrics. It made an odd sound. It worked, though, as echoes echoed down a hallway to create a spooky atmosphere. The song debuted on the Billboard charts at number 68 on March 3. It reached the top spot by May 5. There it remained for 7 weeks. By the year's conclusion, it was 1950's CXS best-selling single. Not everyone, however, thought it was fantastic. On the Milton Burley Show on June 5, 1956, Elvis performed Hound Dog. He shifted his hips. He gave his legs a shake. The United States went insane. Newspapers assailed him. The parents were angry. He was known by preachers as Elvis the Pelvis. TV stations either insisted that cameras only record him from the waist up or banned him. Children, however, adored it. Teenagers purchased his recordings in greater numbers the louder the adults screamed. Even Ed Sullivan had to concede, having earlier referred to Elvis as too unsuitable for family television. On Sullivan's show, Elvis made an appearance on September 9, 1956. The viewership was 60 million. His entire body was still visible on camera, but not for long. He was only captured on camera from the waist up by his third appearance in January 1957. But the harm had already done. He was suddenly everywhere. And he was becoming wealthy. Incredibly wealthy. Elvis never disputed in interviews the source of his music. He was candid while discussing black singers. "This is how they have been singing for years," he remarked. "I merely accelerated it." He said, "Up, Arthur, big boy. That's all right" was initially sung by that man. The true king, Fats Domino, was called by him. And he meant it. Little Richard even referred to Elvis as an integrator, a person who introduced black music to white listeners. The demand exceeded RCA's capacity to meet it. 10 million Elvis singles were sold in a single year. Hotel Heartbreak achieved double platinum status. Teddy Bear made $3 million. A Stubborn Woman made $1.65 million. 2.68 million sold, much down. Elvis continued to produce hits even after enlisting in the Army in 1958. RCA had kept his reputation on the charts by preserving unreleased recordings. It succeeded. When A Big Hunk of Love was still in uniform, it became the #1 song. Elvis Presley was already America's biggest star when he was recruited into the U.S. Army on March 24, 1958. He sold out gigs, had a following of consecutive hits, and had millions of admirers. Then everything abruptly came to a stop. His career was considered to be over by some. 2 years out of the limelight? That might destroy the momentum of any star. However, Elvis made an unexpected decision. He refused special treatment rather than accepting a simple task of amusing troops. His dream was to serve as a regular soldier. He joined the 3rd Armored Division and went about his duties as any other soldier would. Parents, educators, and critics all had a different perspective on him after that one action. They referred to him as patriotic, serious, and courteous. For once, they weren't upset about his trembling hip. They held him in high regard. However, as his image was being cleaned up, something sinister infiltrated. Amphetamines were first introduced to Elvis while he was serving in Germany. During long night shifts, soldiers used them to keep awake. Elvis enjoyed their effect on him. Alert, concentrated, and full of energy. After then, barbiturates were used to put him to sleep. He carried that cycle throughout his life, ups to wake high, downers to go asleep. He was also grieving at the moment. He was devastated by his mother Gladys's passing, which occurred shortly before he departed for Germany. He used drugs as a coping mechanism. A new chapter then began. He got to know 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu in Germany. She would later marry him. He carried that bond home with him from when he was serving. He was seen as a potential bride and had a cleaner image by the time he was released on March 5, 1960. As well as a new addiction he couldn't get rid of. That addiction would kill him 17 years later. There were 14 medications in his bloodstream when he passed away. 10 of them were at risky concentrations. Hollywood called once again from home. Elvis immediately began making movies. Initially, they appeared promising. However, by 1962, everything was predictable. He portrayed the same type of character in practically all of the movies, a charming musician surrounded by attractive women, at race cars, or at beach parties. From 1960 to 1968, he produced 21 pictures, sometimes as many as 4 annually. They each had 10 to 12 songs. The majority of them were unmemorable. At the box office, the formula was successful, but it broke his heart. He made an effort to get out. In the country, Flaming Star and Wild were more somber. Acting more, fewer songs. However, they did not earn much money. Colonel Parker immediately pulled him back into the formula. It only got worse. The films Spin Out, Clambake, and Haram Scarum even caused Elvis to roll his eyes. He sobbed after finishing the Easy Come, Easy Go movie. "This is what it has come to," he informed his friends. "Goddamn, I'm a bellboy who can sing." Because of the poor writing, one critic claimed that he was always portraying the same character, Elvis, but in different uniforms, sometimes an army veteran, sometimes a racing car driver, sometimes a beach bum. The money, however, continued to flow. He earned over $175 million from his films between 1956 and 1969. More than $1.4 billion today. Despite only costing $2.5 million to produce, the majority of films earn twice or even 3 times that much. Blue Hawaii earned $4.2%. It earned $4.7 million for Viva Las Vegas. Even the cheap, dumb ones turned a profit. Tickle Me made $3 million despite only costing $1.8 million. The movies kept the money coming in, even while soundtrack sales declined. Executives in Hollywood stopped referring to them as movies in their memos. They were known as cash registers. The reviews were of little concern to them. They were concerned because every Elvis movie earned at least $750,000 in overseas markets, such as Germany and Japan. Despite how awful it was. But everything changed with one movie. Elvis met Margaret during the filming of Viva Las Vegas in the summer of 1963. She wasn't your average co-star. She was as talented, charismatic, and full of energy as he was. Sparks flew at once. Their chemistry was evident on TV and in real life. Elvis collapsed. He gifted her a Cadillac in pink. They even began referring to her as his female twin and wearing similar gold bracelets. But something was wrong. There was Priscilla waiting back in Germany. She was incensed when the affair's news broke. She called Graceland and offered Elvis the option of either Anne or herself. Priscilla was his choice, but he never really let Margaret go. He sent her guitar-shaped flower bouquets before every Vegas show until the day he passed away. After several decades, she personally attested to that. They completed the formula by 1969. Elvis wished to leave. On November 10, 1969, Change of Habit, his final film, was released. Something was different. He played a doctor who worked in a low-income area of New York. Who is his romantic interest? Mary Tyler Moore plays the role of a nun. Racism, poverty, mental health, and even church reform were all addressed in the story. It was not flawless. Certain sequences, such as the one when a child with autism receives rage therapy, haven't held up well over time. But it was an effort. Elvis desired to be taken seriously once more. The movie was much more serious and had a larger budget, $3.2 million. The criticism wasn't nice. One person described it as foolish but well-meaning. There was no closure at all in the conclusion. Perhaps the nun left her vows for Elvis. Perhaps not. Nobody knew. But there was a noticeable change. His last picture was called Change of Habit. In retrospect, it was also the only one that made a sincere effort to convey anything genuine. On May 1, 1967, Priscilla and Elvis got married. In the city of Las Vegas. It was only an 8-minute ceremony. By 9 in the morning, it was over. Only 14 people were invited, despite Colonel Tom Parker's efforts to make headlines. They hosted a press conference and a $10,000 champagne luncheon for about 100 guests following the vows. Red West, one of Elvis Presley's closest pals, was not invited. There was a great deal of tension behind the scenes. Following the festivities, Elvis and Priscilla took a quick flight to Palm Springs for their brief honeymoon. A ranch close to the Mississippi border was where they stayed for 3 peaceful weeks. He adored playing house there, Elvis later remarked. Their private lives were anything but tranquil, even if it was a rare period of serenity. The extent of Elvis's power on Priscilla was disclosed in her 1985 memoir, Elvis and Me. He informed a buddy that she was young enough to train in any way he desired when she was still a teenager. He chose her attire. He instructed her in hair and cosmetics application. He dressed her up to look like a doll, according to one of his entourage members. Additionally, Elvis offered her medicines without always explaining what they were. She described how sleeping pills rendered her unconscious for 2 days. Additionally, when she was exhausted at school, he gave her amphetamines. To her horror, they even tried LSD together. He flipped it on her every time she questioned him about other women. He'd threatened to return her to Memphis. He would then have second thoughts after she started crying. Emotional warfare was the tactic. Priscilla gave birth to Lisa Marie Presley on February 1, 1968. It was nearly to the day, precisely 9 months after the wedding. Elvis was first anxious about fatherhood. Even a trial separation was requested when Priscilla was 7 months pregnant. But he was different when Lisa was born. His private jet bears her name. It was the vehicle he used for all of his excursions. However, it didn't last. In 1972, Elvis and Priscilla split up. Lisa Marie was just 4 years old. She frequently stayed at Graceland during school breaks, but she resided with her mother in Los Angeles. She was at Graceland on August 16, 1977, the night her father passed away. Her age was only 9 years old. She would always be tormented by that moment. Along with her great-grandmother Minnie Mae and grandfather Vernon, Lisa inherited Elvis's estate upon his passing. She was the only heir. Once they are dead. The couple's marriage had been failing for years. It was in the worst possible way that Priscilla learned of Elvis's infidelity. At a panel in Orlando in 2025, she claimed to have found letters from ladies expressing gratitude to Elvis for the intimate invitations. One note said, "I'm so glad you greeted me, Charlie Hodge asked me to come up." She approached Elvis, who denied everything. She felt bad for even asking, because of him. Finally, she gave up trying. "You didn't have a life of your own," she said. "His life was yours." She had begun an affair with her karate instructor, Mike Stone, by the early 1970s. In a 2017 interview, she claimed that the marriage was terminated due to infidelity on both sides. "He wasn't faithful. All I wanted to do was not share him." Nevertheless, she claimed that her love for him never faded. She had to discover who she was, so she left. In October 1973, they completed their divorce. She first only consented to $100,000 in modest monthly payments, but her new attorneys insisted on higher amounts. Ultimately, she received $725,000 in continuous support. 5% of Elvis Presley's publishing houses and half the proceeds from the sale of their Beverly Hills residence. But she didn't end there. This and Beau, Priscilla's Los Angeles store, launched that same year. Diana Ross, Cher, and Barbra Streisand were among her clients. When Elvis passed away in 1977, Priscilla took over as his executor. The outcome was disastrous. The annual cost of maintaining Graceland was $500,000. Lisa's fortune had shrunk to just $1 million. A brave choice was made by Priscilla. She created a public museum at Graceland. It was first opened on June 7, 1982. The gamble paid off. In barely 4 weeks, it recovered its expenses. The estate became a $100 million enterprise under Priscilla's direction. Elvis made one of the most significant comebacks in music history during this time. On December 3, 1968, Singer Presents was broadcast on NBC. Elvis, the director, Steve Binder, had a different vision. It was originally intended to be a Christmas special. He wanted an explosive, unadulterated vibe. Elvis consented. Both solo stand-up and sit-down encounters with fans were filmed in June. Seeing Elvis in black leather was the high point. It was a renowned look. "I wrote the last song, If I Can Dream, specifically for him." Parker objected, but Elvis persisted. The show attracted 42% of the TV audience when it debuted. It was the season's highest-rated program. Everyone was aware of Elvis's return. Next was Vegas. Elvis gave a performance on July 31, 1969, at the newly constructed International Hotel in Las Vegas. All 2,000 seats in the room were occupied. Sometimes 2 gigs a night, he performed 57 shows in 4 weeks. A crowd of hundreds of fans lined up. Just to see him, several people traveled from Europe. Reviews were excellent. He returned, performing 636 sold-out gigs in a span of 7 years. The first night was fantastic, according to Priscilla. Elvis looked like a tiger on the loose, according to a pal. He made Vegas his new empire. It was time for Elvis to have a band. James Burton, a guitarist, was requested to construct one. The TCB band got their start like that. Taking care of business with a lightning bolt was what it stood for. Elvis emblazoned the emblem on everything, including his jewelry, firearms, and plane. John Wilkinson, Ronnie Tutt, Larry Mahabharak, Jerry Sheff, and James Burton were all members of the band. Later, backing vocals were added by the Imperials and the Sweet Inspirations. Elvis even had his inner circle given personalized TCB necklaces. His Vegas performances grew into extravagant extravaganzas. He had on rhinestone jumpsuits. Like a martial artist, he moved. During the show, he distributed scarves. It was Elvis at his best. Elvis never stopped believing in gospel despite everything. How Great Thou Art earned him his first Grammy in 1967. Slow hymns and lively spirituals were mixed together. He then won another Grammy for his album He Touched Me, which was published in 1972. Alongside the Imperials and other well-known gospel singers, he recorded it. 1992 saw the album become gold, while 1999 saw it go platinum. Ginger Alden and Elvis first met in November 1976. Her age was only 20. His age was 41. 2 months later, he proposed with a huge ring of diamonds that cost about $70,000. Ideally, it was a dream. It wasn't, though. Ginger awoke one night with a loud bang. With a .357 Magnum in his hand, Elvis stood at the foot of the bed. Above her head, there was a hole in the wall. She failed to bring him yogurt, so he stated he fired her. Ginger remained despite being in shock. It wasn't the only instance. At one point, a running toilet infuriated Elvis. Using what Ginger described as a machine gun, he destroyed it. During a disagreement about how much juice he drank while on vacation in Hawaii, he slapped her. "When I'm speaking, no one ever leaves me," he assured her. He dominated her from the start. He responded, "I'll decide," when she begged to ride in his Ferrari. After that, he presented her with a gold bracelet that read Elvis in diamonds. Elvis slammed a Gatorade bottle against the wall when she was hesitant to end her relationship with another man. He informed her, "Now everyone will know you belong to me." She wasn't popular with his pals. They believed she was indifferent. She only stayed, according to others, because her mother wanted a new car, for jackets, and gifts. She was never trusted by anyone close to Elvis. Elvis was by that point also collapsing on the inside. His personal physician, Dr. George Nikopoulos, has been giving him medication for years. Elvis received more than 10,000 prescriptions for medications, hormones, sleeping pills, uppers, downers, and painkillers in the 8 months of 1977 alone. According to the doctor, he also offered him placebos, but it made no difference. What he called attacks was taken by Elvis. 3 significant drug hits every day. Quaaludes, Demerol, Secondal, and Valium were among the potent medications in each. Elvis would have his first attack at around 2 in the morning, according to his stepbrother David Stanley. He would then eat something and occasionally nod off in the middle of his bite, even choking on his meal. He had been given medications to keep him awake while on army duty a long time ago, which was when that habit began. Elvis's body had transformed by this time. Even though he was lethargic and fat, his clothes still looked amazing. Inspired by karate uniforms and high collars, he designed his well-known jumpsuits when he was still in shape. However, when his weight increased, the suits were modified to accommodate his increased bulk. The capes and diamonds diverted the eye. It was disguised entertainment. Liberace had an influence on them as well. Elvis had met this person years before in Vegas. Nevertheless, there were flashes of inspiration. Aloha from Hawaii, which Elvis performed in 1973, created history. It was the world's first concert broadcast via satellite. Many billions of people watched. However, the reality was that it was only shown live in 6 nations. Of the 21 countries that saw it at all, the majority received it later. It was nevertheless a huge success. The United States broadcast by NBC became the year's highest-rated program. However, his last chapter also began with that show. Elvis continued to sing. More than 500 performances. But he was rapidly losing his health. His final performance took place in Indianapolis on June 26, 1977. Even with 18,000 people in the crowd, Elvis was barely able to keep it together. His lyrics were a mess. He inquired as to the day, seeming perplexed. He sang with great emotion, including "You Gave Me a Mountain," but he also babbled about Polish folk tunes. "We will see you again," he said in closing to the audience. "Blessings. Adios." His death occurred less than 2 months later. Elvis Presley was getting ready for a new tour on August 16, 1977. Before his flight, he went to the restroom at around 7 a.m. to rest. At 2:30 p.m., Ginger discovered him lying face down on the restroom floor. He was not breathing, blue, and cold. He was taken by paramedics to Baptist Memorial. When Dr. Nick got into the ambulance, it was already too late. The time Elvis was declared dead was 3:30 p.m. The toxicological results later stunned the entire globe. In his body, 14 different narcotics were discovered. 10 were at hazardous concentrations. He had 10 times as much codeine in his system as was safe. He was in possession of morphine, Valium, methaqualone, and more. Heart failure, however, was the official word during the news conference. Drugs weren't a factor, Dr. Francisco said. However, the other physicians didn't agree. They said he was slain by narcotics. When David Stanley was 4 years old, he had his first encounter with Elvis Presley. His mother, wed Vernon Presley, Elvis Presley's father, in 1960. David moved into the Presley residence at Graceland with his 2 brothers, Ricky and Billy, as a result of that marriage. David spent the following 17 years living there. Elvis wasn't merely a stepbrother to him. He started to resemble a father figure more. Elvis had total financial control over the home and a powerful personality. David recalls that he used to get back pats from Elvis. And everything felt fine in that instant. It wasn't easy to live in Elvis's world, though. Whatever Elvis was into at the time was the center of attention in the house. Karate, military history, and Cadillacs. Everybody in the home had to like anything he loved. David grew increasingly immersed in Elvis's world as he grew older. He became a member of what fans dubbed the Memphis Mafia. Elvis's close circle was this group. He was safeguarded and his everyday affairs were managed by those who accompanied him around. David oversaw Elvis on tour, conducted errands, maintained the itinerary, and served as a bodyguard. However, there was a price for being so near. He witnessed things that others missed, such as Elvis's ongoing battle with insomnia or his reliance on medications to get by each day. David later claimed that the situation was exacerbated by the Memphis Mafia. He thought that they were too